The air inside the great hall felt heavy enough to drown in, thick with the sweetness of moon-bloom incense and the sharp metallic sting of ritual silver. They called it the scent of destiny, meant to bind souls together. To me, it was the smell of a golden cage locking shut. My hands, hidden beneath the wide sleeves of a borrowed silk gown, trembled as I stood before the bonding stone. Its polished obsidian surface threw back a fractured reflection of my own terrified face. This was supposed to be the moment that defined my future, a sacred vow spun out of politics. But fate, much like the wild wolves of the unforgiving north, never follows the path men try to carve. The whispering of the court slithered behind me like 1,000 snakes. I was Lyra Windell, daughter of a healer. No title, no lands, no drop of noble blood. Just a weed plucked to decorate a royal garden, chosen for Riven Thorn, not out of love, but for the alliance my family's healer guild could bring. To them I was plain, quiet, convenient. I tried to draw strength from their contempt. My eyes found Riven across the stone. He was the younger prince, the spare heir, his smile warm enough to coax sunlight out of storm clouds. His hair glowed like honey, and his eyes carried a kindness that felt almost dangerous in these cold halls. When he looked at me, he didn't see a political pawn, he saw a woman. He'd visited me in the gardens, spoken about books and music, promised a life of peace and laughter, far from the suffocating shadow of the crown. It was more than I'd ever dared to hope for. A simple life. A gentle husband. I could learn to love him, I already was. He gave me a small nod, reassuring, yet strained. His jaw tightened beneath the weight of royal expectation. He was born of royal blood, but forever eclipsed by the legend of his brother the king, Kyle Varen. His name was rarely spoken above a whisper. He was not just a man. He was a storm, a myth forged in war and blood. The alpha of alphas, his wolf yet powerful, it was said the winds themselves obeyed him. He ruled from a throne built of silence and fear. His mere presence a weight that bent every will around him. No one expected him to attend a minor ceremony like this. Kings didn't bother with their brothers' bonding rites. His absence had been a mercy, a breath of air in a suffocating room. But when Aaron Solon, the High Elder, raised his hands, his voice like dry autumn leaves, echoing through the hall, the air began to change. "We gather under the moon, mother's gaze," he intoned, to witness the joining of two souls and strengthen the pack's bond. He gestured for Riven to step forward. My heart pounded like a caged bird. This was it, the final step. Riven moved the soft creak of his ceremonial leathers loud in the silence. His hand hovered above the cold stone, ready to speak the vow of protection, when the world suddenly stopped. It wasn't a sound that announced him. It was the absence of sound. The air grew dense electric. Every breath turned to frost. A wave of raw fear swept through the hall. The guards, the Blood Guard warriors, hardened by countless battles, snapped to rigid attention, their hands instinctively dropping to their swords in reverence, not defense. From the great arched doors, a shadow broke free from the darkness. Kyle Varen entered, tall, broad, draped in black leather that swallowed the torchlight. A silver scar cut from his temple down across his eye, ending near his mouth, a mark that made his face both savage and heartbreakingly human. But it was his eyes that seized the room. Not brown like his brothers, but a piercing glacial gray, alive with something ancient and inhuman. The eyes of a wolf trapped in a king's body. He didn't look at the courtiers. He didn't look at Riven. His gaze found me, and the world stopped breathing. It wasn't a look. It was an impact. My lungs forgot how to work my body, trembling with a primal instinct older than thought run. He was winter embodied, a predator born of storm and moonlight. And then his scent hit me, wild pine-cold rain and lightning over mountain stone, untamed, consuming. It wasn't perfume. It was power. It bypassed reason and struck straight into my soul. My blood caught fire. My pulse roared in my ears. Something inside me, something ancient and sleeping, woke at his presence. And I knew with a terror that tasted like longing my life had just ended, and something far more dangerous had begun. It was a sensation I couldn't name, something buried and ancient stirring awake inside me. An instinct older than language clawing its way to the surface. Riven froze, his hands hovering over the bonding stone. "Brother," he breathed, his voice cracking, "you honor us." I didn't expect. But Kyle Varen's eyes never left mine. He moved forward, each step soundless, lethal. The kind of silence that hunters wore before the kill. The entire hall seemed to stop breathing. Even Aaron Solon, the High Elder, faltered. "My king," he stammered, voice trembling, "the rite has begun. Your brother's bonding is already." Kyle stopped inches from me. Heat radiated from him like wildfire, wrapping around me in a scent that stole the air from my lungs. Storm-soaked pine iron and power. I tilted my head up, and his silver eyes swallowed me whole. The wolf was right there, beneath the surface, feral, sentient, watching me, as though it already knew me. A low, guttural sound rolled from his chest, vibrating through the floor beneath my feet. It wasn't a man's growl. It was the sound of a predator claiming the world as his. The hall fell into reverent silence. Riven's face drained of color. The world had narrowed to the space between the king and me. My heart slammed against my ribs, wild and uneven. Kyle lifted a scarred hand. I flinched, but he didn't strike. His fingers hovered inches from my skin, trembling with restrained power. "Her scent," he muttered, his voice low, rough, unearthly. The words weren't for the court or even his brother. They were for me, and the beast inside him. "It calls." He inhaled deeply, eyes fluttering shut for the briefest second. Then they opened, blazing gold beneath the frost of gray. The light of an alpha's bond. Ancient. Absolute. "No, Riven," whispered, horror cracking his voice. "Kyle, don't." But the king wasn't listening. He was answering something far older than command or blood. His power erupted. The gold in his eyes burned molten. His voice dropping into a growl that belonged to no human throat. One word thundered through the chamber, ancient, final, divine. "Mine." The word hit the bonding stone like lightning. White cracks split across its obsidian face. Torches exploded into wild flame. The sacred magic roared to life, not for Riven, but for Kale, the Alpha King. It struck me like fire, invisible chains of heat wrapping around my soul. Gasps filled the hall, steel clattered. People screamed, but I saw only him. His power seared through me, binding spirit to spirit. The pine and storm scent filled my lungs, my veins, my very mind. The ceremony shattered. The vow meant for another was gone. And with it peace. A war had been born in that hall, and I was its prize. He hadn't touched me, but he had taken everything. The chaos of the world crashed back, screams, steel shattering glass. The broken bonding stone pulsed with dying magic, glowing like a wounded heart. Through it all, Kale stood motionless, the golden blaze in his eyes fading to iron gray. Calm, terrifying. A southern lord shouted, "Seize him," his voice shaking with madness. Kale didn't even turn his head. A growl rumbled from deep within him, dark and primal, and the man fell silent, choking on his own terror. The blood guard shifted but didn't move. No one dared to, no one but Riven. "Kyle." His voice broke sharp with betrayal and heartbreak. He stepped between us, trembling but unyielding, a single spark of defiance, before a god. He was smaller than his brother, not as commanding, but there was a stubborn courage in his stance, the kind a man has when he's standing between love and ruin. "She's promised to me," Riven said, voice breaking under the weight of disbelief. "The rites were for us. By the mother's name, you can't do this." Kyle Varen's gaze slid to his brother, and for the first time I saw more than a king. I saw a man haunted, conflicted, unreadable. His jaw flexed, the the scar along his cheek tightening. "The bond has chosen," he said simply. His tone held no apology, only the absolute authority of fate. "It is done. Chosen." Riven's voice cracked into anger. "You took it. You always take what you want." His fists clenched at his sides. "The throne, our father's sword, and now her. Is there anything you'll ever leave me?" A dangerous glint flared in Kael's eyes as he stepped forward, a shift so fluid it could only belong to a predator. "Be careful, little brother," he warned, his voice low and edged with threat. "You speak of things you cannot begin to understand." Then, as if Riven were nothing but a shadow, he turned away from him and looked at me again. The rest of the world fell away. His hand lifted, and this time his fingers brushed against my neck just below my ear. The touch wasn't cruel, but it branded me, all the same, heat searing through skin and sinking straight into my soul. A shiver of power jolted through me, sharp and alive, humming, with the same strange energy that bound us. I gasped, stumbling back, but he didn't let me get far. His presence closed around me like steel. "The Blood Guard," he commanded, his voice ringing through the hall like thunder. Two massive warriors emerged from the shadows, black armor etched with snarling wolves, eyes glinting with loyalty born of fear. "Escort her to the east wing to my chambers. No one enters. No one." His cold gray eyes met Riven's across the distance, and in that look was finality, cruel and absolute. Riven's face twisted in despair. "Lyra," he cried, reaching for me. But the Blood Guard were already flanking me, a living wall of iron and strength. I couldn't speak. I couldn't look at him. Seeing the pain in his eyes would shatter what little resolve I had left. I was being stolen, ripped from the life that had barely begun. The guard's grip was firm, but not cruel, as they led me through the silent corridors. Every step echoed with the weight of judgment. I could feel the eyes of the Court of Shadows burning into my back. I was no longer Lyra Wendell, the healer's daughter. I was the symbol of the Alpha King's power, a trophy claimed in a war between brothers. They didn't lead me through the open halls, but down hidden passages where torches burned cold blue. The walls here bore no feasts or hunts, only scenes of conquest, blood, fire, and the unbroken line of the Varan kings. The deeper we went, the colder the air became. His scent filled it, pine frost, and something feral that clung to the stones themselves. The east wing was a fortress within the castle. When we reached its end, the guards stopped before towering iron-banded doors. One pushed them open, revealing a chamber vast and merciless. It wasn't a bedroom, it was a domain. A black hearth dominated the wall, cold and empty. A massive bed of carved dark wood stood raised on a stone dais, draped in heavy furs. Weapons lined the walls, swords, axes, maps, of wars long past. No silk, no softness. It wasn't a home. It was the den of a wolf. The door shut behind me with a booming finality. The lock clicked, sealing my fate. For a long moment I just stood there, frozen, lost inside a silence so deep it felt alive. The silk of my ceremonial gown clung to me like a memory from another world. I hugged myself against a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. His touch still burned phantom hot on my skin. I could feel the bond thrumming within me, low and constant, a tether I couldn't sever. It shouldn't have felt right, but it did, terrifyingly so. My mind screamed this was wrong. I was meant for Riven, for peace, for a quiet love. But the bond didn't care. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, wild and certain. I sank to my knees on the fur rug, the strength draining from me. I mourned everything, the man who had smiled at me with warmth, the life that had been stolen before it began, and the woman I'd been just an hour ago. That woman was gone, and what remained belonged to the Alpha King. A faint click broke the stillness. A narrow door near the hearth opened, and an older woman stepped through with quiet precision. She was tall and thin, her silver hair pulled back so tightly It seemed to sculpt her face into stern lines. Her dress, a plain gray wool uniform, spoke of discipline and long service, not warmth. Her gaze swept over me, cold and exacting. "You will not kneel," she said crisply. "The king's mate does not kneel." The word struck like a whip. The king's mate. The phrase was raw, primal, and absolute. I stumbled to my feet, heat rising to my face as shame burned away the last of my trembling. "I am Maven Crow," she continued, her tone flat, but her eyes assessing every flaw. "Keeper of the king's chambers. I have served here since his mother, Queen Celine Varin, passed." Her words landed heavy in my chest. These weren't guest quarters. He had brought me into the hollow of his own life, his mother's rooms, the heart of his solitude. "You will be hungry," Maven stated, not asked. "I will have food brought and water drawn for a bath. That gown is unsuitable." She gestured curtly for me to follow. The small adjoining room she led me to was carved from the same black stone as the hearth, a deep copper tub already steaming neath the glow of torchlight. While she arranged clean linens, her voice cut the silence again. "The court is in uproar. Aaron Solon has declared the bond legitimate, unorthodox but binding. The law is clear. Once a soul bond is forged, it cannot be undone. It supersedes all vows." She paused and turned her sharp eyes meeting mine. "The southern lords are outraged. They call it betrayal. Prince Riven Thorn has locked himself in his barracks with his guard. There is talk of rebellion, of civil war." Each word was another nail sealing the coffin of my old life. "And the king?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. "He is with the Crimson Circle," Maven replied, "preparing for the consequences of his choice, as should you." She moved to leave, then stopped at the threshold. "You have healer's hands, girl. Too soft for this place. Learn to be strong, or this castle will devour you." The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the hiss of steam and her chilling warning echoing in my ears. She was right. I wasn't built for this world. I was a nurturer, one who grew things, who mended wounds, not someone forged for the brutal games of kings and wolves. Hours later, dressed in a simple gray nightgown that felt more like mourning cloth than comfort, I sat before the cold hearth. The bond thrummed beneath my skin, a restless hum that wasn't mine. It was his. I could feel it. Kael Varen's energy pulsing at the edge of my consciousness. Fury, focus, control so tight it burned. The intimacy was unbearable, like someone breathing inside my thoughts. Then without warning, the main doors opened. He filled the doorway, towering silent, every shadow bending toward him. He had shed his formal leathers for a black tunic and breeches. Yet he looked no less dangerous. His face was drawn, Nishimodi, exhaustion carving deeper lines around his eyes. But the moment his gaze found me, weariness vanished, replaced by that same unnerving, consuming focus. He shut the door. The sound echoed like a heartbeat inside the room and inside me. He studied me in silence, the borrowed gown, my bare feet, the fear I couldn't hide. His scent, pine iron night air, rolled through the chamber rich and wild. Beneath it lingered the metallic tang of blood. My stomach turned. He had come from the Crimson Circle, or from something far darker. Without a word, he crossed to the great table, poured dark wine into a silver goblet, and drank it in one long swallow. "My brother has demanded trial by combat," he said at last, his voice low and dangerous. "He wants to fight me for you." My heart froze. Gentle, tender Riven. Against him, it was madness. "No," I breathed the word, escaping before I could stop it. Kael turned slowly, his eyes sharp as steel. I refused, of course. What the bond has sealed, no blade can sever. But he calls it cowardice. He gathers allies. He believes love gives him strength greater than mine. The firelight caught in his silver eyes, and for a moment I couldn't tell if it was sorrow or fury that burned there. Maybe both. Either way, the storm had already begun, and I was its center. He let out a short, bitter laugh, one without a hint of humor. He's a fool. As Kyle Varen started toward me, instinct screamed, "Run!" I scrambled to my feet, backing away until my shoulders hit the cold stone of the hearth. Trapped. His shadow fell over me, swallowing the firelight. Up close, he was devastatingly imposing, the kind of presence that stole the air from your lungs. The scar on his cheek caught the dim glow like a blade etched into his skin. His gaze swept over me, my trembling lips, my wide, frightened eyes. "You're afraid of me," he said. It wasn't a question. I couldn't form words. I managed only a small nod. The truth hung between us, fragile and alive, like a wild bird caught in the wolf's stare. For an instant, something flickered behind his eyes, frustration, maybe pain, but it vanished beneath a mask of ruthless control. His eyes dropped to my throat, watching the frantic pulse beneath my skin. His voice came low, rough. "Good." The single word rolled through the air like a growl, dark, heavy, threaded with something I couldn't name. He leaned closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "Fear will keep you alive in this court." He took another step, erasing the space between us. His scent hit me, warm and suffocating pine smoke, and the faint metallic tang of iron. His lips hovered near my ear, and I could feel the rumble of his next words vibrate through my skin. "But fear," he murmured, voice edged with heat, "will not keep you from my bed." The words struck harder than a physical blow. My fear, cold and paralyzing until then flashed into something hot and wild. The healer in me was gone, only the cornered animal remained. I flattened against the hearth, the rough stone biting into my back. My hands rose instinctively, trembling but defiant. "No," I whispered, the sound raw, shredded by terror. His expression changed, grim satisfaction, as if my resistance was exactly what he'd expected. "No," he echoed, dangerously soft. He stepped closer still, his body caging mine. He didn't touch me yet, his presence pressed against me like heat from a forge. His breath brushed my cheek. In his eyes, silver caught the firelight, hard as steel. "You don't have a choice, little healer," he said. Voice gravel deep. The bond was forged. The moon. Mother herself bore witness. I swallowed hard. "The old magic answered," I whispered, finding a fragment of courage through fear. "It answered you. You didn't earn it, you stole it. It's not a bond. It's a theft." Something twitched in his jaw. For the briefest second the mask cracked, and I saw pain, ancient, hollow, real. Then it was gone, replaced by iron once more. "You think you understand what this is?" He snarled, his face inches from mine. His breath was warm with wine and the scent of night. The bond pulsed violently between us, and nausea twisted in my stomach. It wasn't only my fear anymore. I felt his rage surge into me like a storm, vast and consuming. My knees weakened. The world tilted. He flinched too, a hiss slipping between his teeth. He tore himself back, retreating a single step, then another. His fists clenched tight enough to whiten the scarred knuckles. Whatever he was fighting, it wasn't me. It was inside him. "The bond isn't a prize," he growled hoarsely. Each word dragged through grit. He turned from me, crossing the room to the cold hearth. Bracing his hands against the mantel, his shoulders trembled with restrained fury. "It's a chain, and it binds both ways." I stared at him, heart pounding, not understanding. He spoke again, his voice low and ragged. "Every feeling you have, your fear, your hate, your grief for my brother, I feel it. Every damn one. It burns through me like fire, cuts through me like glass. It's constant." When he turned back, his face was carved in torment and rage. "My wolf claimed you, yes. That's his nature. But the magic bound me to your pain. So don't speak to me of theft, Lara Wendell." His voice broke into a snarl. You are my captor as much as I am yours." The truth hit like a blow. The bond wasn't domination. It was a wound they shared. My suffering was his torment. My fear scarred him. And for the first time I understood my weakness wasn't helplessness. It was a weapon. "Then let me go," I whispered, my voice trembling but clear. "If being near me hurts you so much, just send me away." Calvarin gave a sharp, mirthless laugh, the sound ricocheting off the stone walls like broken glass. "You speak like a child," he said darkly. "You have no idea what you're asking. A soul bond cannot be undone. It can only be severed. By death." He began to pace, his power rolling through the room in waves too fierce for the space to contain. "If I sent you away, the bond would thin to a thread, a wound that never closes. The ache would drive my wolf mad. It would turn on the pack, on my brother, on this entire kingdom until it found you, or destroyed itself trying." His eyes flashed with something wild, almost desperate. "You see, Lyra, we're trapped. You, me, and the curse that ties us together." He stopped inches from me, again, his gaze burning with the intensity of a storm barely restrained. "I don't want your fear," he rasped. "I don't want your hatred." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "But my wolf." He exhaled, the sound torn from his chest. "My wolf demands your surrender. It craves your scent on my furs in this room. It wants to mark you, to erase every trace of my brother from your skin." His throat worked as he dragged in a breath, ragged and uneven. "That is the war I fight every second I'm near you." And then I understood. His earlier threat, my bed, it wasn't a promise of cruelty. It was an admission of battle. He wasn't warning me of what he'd do to me. He was warning me of what he was barely holding back. The realization flickered in his eyes too, something like shame or exhaustion. He turned from me, running a scarred hand across his face. "Sleep," he ordered, roughly, his tone stripped of power now, just weariness. "No harm will come to you tonight. You have my word." He crossed the room to the massive bed draped in furs, but he didn't climb into it. Instead, he pulled one of the heavy pelts free and carried it to the throne-like chair by the hearth. He lowered himself into it, the fur settling around him like armor. He sat in silence, staring into the cold black of the fireplace. The most powerful alpha in the world choosing to sleep away from me, to protect me from himself. The contradiction was dizzying. Numbly, I crossed to the far side of the bed and crawled beneath the remaining furs. They were thick, heavy, and smelled of hemp-pine frost and the sharp bite of the winter wind. It should have terrified me. Instead, it felt safe. I lay rigid, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing in the dark. The bond between us pulsed faintly, no longer sharp with rage, but dulled by something deeper, loneliness. A hollow ache that reached across the distance between us and pressed against my heart. It wasn't mine. It was his. And for the first time I felt not fear for the Alpha King, but pity for the man. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. But the peace shattered moments later, with the deep rolling clang of an alarm bell, loud, frantic, echoing through the stone halls. My eyes flew open. Cale was already on his feet, the bearskin cloak pooling at his boots. His body went still, his head tilting slightly, listening. The air itself seemed to freeze. Then came the shouting, steel clashing on steel, chaos swelling like a rising tide. "What's happening?" I gasped, clutching the furs. "Fools," he growled, his scent shifting iron and storm, the scent of an alpha ready for blood. He actually did it. The doors burst inward with a thunderous crack. Two of Riven Thorn's guards stumbled in their tunics, marked with the silver falcon. Their eyes burned with fear and fanatic resolve. They didn't even have time to cry out. Kael moved like lightning. The first guard's arm snapped beneath his grip, the sword clattering to the floor. A brutal strike silenced him. The second charged, and Kael turned, using the man's own momentum to drive him into the wall with bone-shattering force. It was over in seconds. Two armored bodies sprawled across the stone, groaning. Kael stood over them, his chest heaving, not with exhaustion, but fury. Through the splintered doorway, the hall was chaos. The Bloodguard were already engaged, fighting with ruthless precision. Riven's soldiers fought with passion, but passion couldn't match discipline. The clash of steel and screams filled the corridor. "They're trying to start a civil war," I whispered in horror. "They're trying to reach you," Kael corrected, his voice a snarl. His gaze snapped to me, sharp and burning. "To them, you're not a woman. You're a symbol, my stolen prize. If they can take you, they think they can shatter my rule and hand the crown to my brother." The bond between us flared again. Fear, fury, grief all tangled together. Outside, the kingdom was burning, and I finally understood. I wasn't just caught between two brothers. I was the spark that could destroy them both. He strode toward me with purpose, his movements sharp and commanding. "Get up. We're leaving. Leaving." My voice trembled as I sat upright. Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't find you," Kael Varen replied. His tone clipped, leaving no room for argument. Before I could speak again, his hand wrapped around my arm, firm, unyielding, but not cruel. The urgency in his touch burned hotter than pain. He pulled me toward the far wall where a massive tapestry of an ancient battle hung heavy with dust. Without hesitation, he ripped it aside. Behind it wasn't stone, but a narrow wooden door hidden in shadow. From a chain around his neck, he drew a small iron key and slid it into the lock. The mechanism clicked. Cold, stale air breathed out from the darkness beyond. A secret passage. "Move," he ordered, quietly guiding me inside. The door shut behind us, plunging the world into black. I heard the lock turn, sealing us in. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were our breathing and the wild drum of my pulse. Then came a metallic scrape, a spark, and a lantern flared to life in his hand. Its weak, flickering glow cast his face into harsh relief shadows, dancing across his scar like fire over steel. The corridor was narrow, the walls of stone slick with moisture and age. "Stay close," Kael said, his deep voice echoing in the cramped space. I followed my fingers, grazing the damp walls. We moved through the darkness. The shouts and clash of steel from above faded to silence, replaced by the steady drip of unseen water and the echo of our footsteps. We walked for what felt like forever. The air grew colder, heavier. My thin nightgown clung to me, offering no warmth. I began to shiver, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. He noticed. He stopped abruptly and turned to me. The lantern's light hit him from below, carving his features into a fierce contrast of shadow and flame. "Here," he said gruffly, shrugging off his heavy black tunic and thrusting it toward me. I hesitated. "You'll freeze. Put it on," he cut in. His voice was low, strained, not from anger, but something else. He stood bare-chested in the cold. His body was carved muscle and scars, each one a story written in blood and survival. But one mark stood out, a fresh, angry wound across his ribs, still seeping faintly. "You're hurt," I whispered, my instincts overriding fear. "It's nothing," he snapped, though his tone lacked conviction. "Just wear it." Ignoring the command, I reached out. My fingers brushed the edge of the wound and he tensed instantly, every muscle locking in place. His breath hitched, a sharp, startled sound. The bond between us surged, sparking through my veins. But this time it wasn't fury, it was shock. His shock. "Don't," he rasped, his voice rough, strained. But I couldn't stop. He had bled to protect me. That was something I couldn't ignore. I tore a strip from the hem of my nightgown, my trembling hands moving on instinct. "Hold still," I murmured, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. In the flickering light, I cleaned the edges of the wound as best I could, pressing the cloth gently against his skin. His breath came unevenly. His eyes locked on me with disbelief, as if no one had dared to touch him in years. I wrapped the makeshift bandage around his ribs. My fingers, brushing warm skin, feeling the power that lived beneath it. A low sound rumbled deep in his chest. Not a growl of threat, but confusion. It was the sound of a creature that didn't understand what it was feeling. When I tied the final knot and looked up, the mask of the Alpha King was gone. In its place was something raw, unguarded. He looked lost, like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen without fear. Why, he whispered, his voice hoarse and uncertain. The single word carried the weight of something ancient and wounded. For a moment, neither of us moved. The lantern flame flickered between us, painting his face in gold and shadow. I glanced down at the strip of my nightgown, already darkened by his blood, and then back at him. Why did I help him? I didn't know. Maybe because for the first time I wasn't looking at the Alpha King who had bound me in fire and law, but at a man who bled like anyone else. My healer's training, I said softly. My voice steadier than I felt, is the only answer I have. You were bleeding. And when something is broken, I mend it. The simplicity of my words seemed to crack something open in Kyle Varin. He stared at me, his silver-gray eyes wide, caught between disbelief and something that looked too close to pain. He had been braced for fury, defiance, perhaps hatred. But not this, not quiet compassion, not care. For the first time, the unbreakable Alpha looked lost. The silence stretched heavy with something unspoken. Somewhere deep in the passage, water dripped in steady rhythm, echoing like a heartbeat. Finally, he tore his gaze away, looking down at the tunic still clutched in his hand. Without a word, he shook it out and held it open toward me. It wasn't an order this time. It was an offering. I turned and he draped the heavy black wool over my shoulders. It hung to my knees, far too big, but the warmth was immediate, wrapping me in the scent of pine and frost that clung to him. It should have felt like surrender, like wearing the mark of the wolf who had claimed me. Yet the heat that seeped through me felt more like protection than possession. When I faced him again, he had already rebuilt his armor of composure. The hard lines of his face were once again those of a king, but something haunted lingered behind his eyes. This way, he said quietly, voice low and controlled. He lifted the lantern and moved forward. I followed the echoes of our footsteps, swallowed by the earth. But now the silence between us was different. Not the tense, brittle quiet of fear, but a charged stillness, heavy with what had just passed. The bond between us thrummed faintly, no longer sharp with anger. Instead, it pulsed with confusion, awareness. His thoughts brushed mine like whispers at the edge of hearing, his disbelief, his restraint, the faint tremor of something he didn't understand. And beneath it, I felt my own conflict reflected back at me. My fear of him, yes, but also the healer's instinct that couldn't see him as a monster, only as someone wounded too deeply to know what peace was. The corridor widened, the air growing fresher, carrying the scent of wet stone and something green alive. The ground beneath our feet turned smooth as if worn by centuries of water. Ahead, the lantern's light dimmed against a faint silver glow. We stepped out into a cavern that took my breath away. The ceiling vanished into darkness too high to see. The walls glimmered with living moss that glowed in shades of silver and green, lighting the space in a soft, dream-like radiance. In the center lay a pool of water, still as glass, so clear it mirrored the glowing ceiling perfectly. Each drop that fell from the stalactites above struck the surface with a delicate chime. It felt like standing inside a heartbeat of the world. "What is this place?" I breathed. Kel stepped forward, the lantern's flame paling against the natural light. "The moon spring," he said quietly, reverently. "The source of the castle's wells. They say the first alpha of my bloodline was born from this water, blessed by the moon mother herself." He knelt at the edge of the pool, his scarred fingers trailing through the surface. The liquid didn't ripple, it clung to his skin like molten silver. "It's a place of beginning," he murmured, "and of ending." When he looked back at me, the reflection of the glowing cavern turned his eyes into polished steel. "No one's been here for a century. The entrance was sealed after the Red Rebellion. Only the king knows the path." I realized what he was doing, showing me something no one else alive had seen. trusting me, or perhaps knowing the bond made betrayal impossible. I crossed to the other side of the pool and sat on a moss-covered stone. His tunic felt heavy now, not just from its weight, but from the meaning behind it, a cloak of warmth and solitude both. "Why bring me here?" I asked quietly. He rose and circled the pool, his steps echoing softly on the damp stone until he stopped in front of me. The sheer size of him still made my heart race, but it wasn't the panic of before. It was something more complicated. Wariness, yes, but also curiosity. "Because up there," he said, gesturing toward the hidden world above, "everything is a lie. Politics greed the illusion of loyalty." His voice hardened. "My brother speaks of love as if it's a weapon. The lords call their treachery devotion." He crouched before me close enough that I could feel his breath, his presence overwhelming but steady. His eyes locked with mine. "Down here," he said, voice dropping to a low rumble, "there are no masks, no lies. Just the stone, the water, and the bond." He paused. "And I need you to understand what that truly means." He reached out, not to touch me, but to the space between us. "When my wolf caught your scent in the great hall," Kael Varen said, his voice rough, "it wasn't choice. It was recognition. Something older than this castle, older than my bloodline." His tone deepened, raw and unguarded. "My wolf is damaged. It was forged in the fires of the Northern War. I watched my father die. I took his alpha power on a battlefield, soaked in blood and burning pine. It made my wolf strong, unstoppable, but it left nothing but rage and duty behind." He looked down at the pool, the reflection of his face fractured across its dark surface. "It knows how to protect, how to kill, how to rule, nothing more. It's been alone a long time." Then his eyes flicked to me and his next words came quieter. "And then it smelled you. Not a healer's daughter, not my brother's promised bride. It smelled its missing half. It smelled peace." The words hung in the air, trembling like something sacred. The feared Alpha King, this monster everyone whispered about, had a soul so wounded that peace itself was foreign to him. The ache of his solitude, the vast emptiness I'd felt through the bond, pressed against me like an ocean tide. "And so it claimed you," he finished, voice breaking into a whisper, with all the hunger and desperation of something that had forgotten gentleness. I stared at him, the scar dividing his face, the pain carved into every line of it, and saw not the tyrant I had hated, but the boy who had buried his father in smoke and ashes. The man shackled to a crown he never asked for. My anger, so sharp for so long, dissolved into a deep, aching empathy. He saw it in my eyes and turned away, as if ashamed of being seen. He rose, his voice shifting, becoming colder, harder. "The men who invaded your chambers will be dealt with. But my brother Riven Thorn, he's another matter. What he's done is treason. Treason." My heart stuttered. "The law demands his life. You would kill your own brother." Kael turned toward me, anguish raw on his face. "I am his king before I am his blood. If I spare him, the court will see weakness. It would mean open war, thousands dead." He dragged in a harsh breath, his composure trembling. "I'd be trading his life for theirs." "So you'll kill him for me?" I asked, bitterness rising like bile. "For a bond you forced. For the good of the kingdom," he roared. The cavern shook with the sound, the water in the moon, spring trembling under the power in his voice. Then silence. His fury cracked into remorse. He looked hollow, defeated. "No," he whispered. "I don't know what I'll do. I came down here to escape that choice." He moved toward a shadowed alcove and pulled out a bundle of furs, setting them on the ground a few feet from me. "You're cold," he said simply. "Rest. You're safe here." He meant to sleep away from me alone. But the cavern's beauty did nothing to hide its chill. My shivering started again, tiny tremors I couldn't control. Kael noticed. His jaw flexed, the battle warring across his face, the king, the man, the wolf. With a low growl of frustration, he crossed the space between us in 2 strides. He knelt, scooping me into his arms as if I weighed nothing, and carried me to the furs. The warmth of his body radiated, even through the thin fabric between us. He laid me down, then hesitated, fighting something unseen, before lying beside me. "This isn't for me," he muttered, almost angrily, as if to convince himself. Then with a rough exhale, he drew me closer, wrapping the fur over both of us. The heat of him was overwhelming, steady, fierce, alive. The hard line of his arm curved protectively around me, and though I knew I should have feared it, a strange calm settled over me instead. The bond thrummed through my veins, not as pain, but as warmth, his quiet relief. My trembling stopped. The cavern fell silent except for the rhythm of our breathing, and in that impossible moment lying against the Alpha, who had stolen everything from me, I realized the most dangerous truth of all. I no longer felt afraid. He held me close, and all I could hear was the steady, thunderous beat of his heart against my back, the rhythm of a broken soul finding a fleeting moment of peace. Kyle Varon thought I was asleep. His breathing evened out, but I could feel the wakefulness beneath it, the tension slowly bleeding from his body, one rigid muscle at a time. His arm tightened around me, an unconscious act of possession. Then he lowered his face into my hair and inhaled deeply. Mine he breathed, not a command, not a claim, but a soft aching sigh. It wasn't the brutal declaration from the great hall. It was a prayer, whispered in the dark, fragile, desperate, and full of relief. And just when my treacherous heart began to steady, to the rhythm of his pain struck like lightning. Kyle went rigid, a strangled growl ripping from his throat. The shock burned through, the bond violent, invasive, alive. It wasn't his pain. It wasn't mine. It was something darker, a surge of hatred and despair that didn't belong to either of us. He tore himself away, stumbling to his feet. His hand clutched his head, his eyes wild under the silver glow of the cavern. "What is it?" I cried, sitting up as the cold rushed back around me. His face twisted in disbelief. "It's my brother," he rasped. "Riven. The blood guard have him, and somehow, damn it all, I can feel him." The sanctuary of the moon, spring turned suffocating. Kyle's fury pressed against the air itself, crackling with alpha power. He paced along the pool's edge like a caged predator, the silver reflections trembling around him. How he snarled at the water, his bare chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. "How is this possible? What do you mean you can feel him?" I asked, clutching the too large tunic around me. "Do you feel his pain?" "Not pain," he snapped, turning on me, eyes burning with feral confusion. "His intent, his rage, his conviction that I am the monster who must fall." He raked a hand through his dark hair, the gesture more human than royal. "It's the bond. It was meant to connect Alpha, and made a closed circuit. But you were promised to him." He drew in a shaky breath. "When I claimed you, the magic splintered. It didn't just bind you to me, it echoed. It tied all 3 of us together." My stomach dropped. A triad of souls, a cursed connection linking their fury and my fear. Riven's hatred, Kyle's guilt, my confusion. Feeding one another in an endless spiral. "He's in the dungeons," Kale growled, his voice low, dangerous. "Chained, but his fury still reaches me. His betrayal screams in my head. He calls me coward, monster, kinslayer." He slammed his fist into the stone wall. The crack echoed through the cavern, sharp as thunder. Blood smeared across his knuckles, but he didn't even flinch. "He's trying to drive me mad," and I could feel it too, that corrosive mix of rage and sorrow, clawing through the bond, twisting between us. Riven, powerless, yet still fighting, had turned his fury into a weapon neither could escape. "You have to stop it," I pleaded. "You're the Alpha King. Can't you block it?" He gave a bitter, humorless laugh. "Block it? To silence him would mean silencing you. The same blood runs through that tether. I'd have to sever it entirely and cut away, the only thing keeping my wolf from tearing this castle apart to reach him. He stopped pacing, his face drawn with terrible clarity. He's forced my hand. Either I let this poison consume me, or I end it and him. The words hit like stone. The crown Kyle wore wasn't forged from gold, but from pain and sacrifice, a burden that drew blood every time he breathed. There has to be another way, I whispered, my voice trembling. But even as I said it, I thought of Riven's kind smile, his gentle promise of peace, the man I was meant to marry. Now locked in darkness, his hatred burning like wildfire through the soul of the brother who had taken everything from him and from me. The guilt twisted deep in my stomach, sharp and sickening. There is no other way, Kyle Varan said, his voice stripped of warmth, hollow as the cavern around us. The law is clear. The pact demands blood. A ruler who cannot control his own bloodline is no alpha at all. He walked back to where the furs still lay and picked up the black tunic he'd made me wear. His scent pine and winter clung to the fabric. His hands tightened around it as if he could strangle regret itself. Bringing you here was a mistake, he murmured, seeking peace. A king has no right to peace. Then he turned toward the tunnel, his broad shoulders cutting through the dim silver light. He was already leaving, already resolved. Wait! I ran after him, my bare feet slapping against the cold stone. What are you going to do? He paused at the mouth of the passage, but didn't turn around. I'm going to be a king, he said. The finality in his voice hit like a blade. He was going to execute his brother. My throat tightened. I couldn't let that happen. Riven's only crime had been loving me, believing in a future that never had a chance. His death would stain both our souls. Take me with you, I blurted. Kale turned slowly, his face unreadable stone. This is not something you're meant to see. No, I said, forcing my trembling voice steady. It's something I have to witness. This blood will be on me too. If you're to be his executioner, then I will be his witness. The challenge surprised even me, foolish and desperate, but something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps he saw my demand as a penance, or perhaps as punishment he believed he deserved. So be it, he growled. But your tears will not change the law. The climb back through the secret tunnels was suffocating. The silence pressed down heavier than the stone above us. Each step was a heartbeat closer to tragedy. The psychic pull of Riven Thorn grew stronger. A relentless storm of hatred and betrayal, hammering through the fractured bond. I could feel it gnawing at Kyle's control, his every step an act of pure will. We emerged into a narrow, dust-choked antechamber behind the castle's guardroom. Distant clangs of metal echoed faintly, life continuing above a kingdom that didn't yet know its heart was breaking. Kyle shoved open the oak door, stepping into the torch-lit corridor. Two blood guard soldiers straightened at attention, eyes widening slightly when they saw me draped in the king's tunic. Still they said nothing. Discipline over disbelief. The Prince Kyle demanded, voice like carved granite. Where is he, deep cells, my king? One guard answered, his tone low and reverent. Level 3. Secured and isolated. Prepare the executioner's block, Kale ordered coldly. Lower courtyard. At dawn. The guard's expression barely flickered, but shock rippled beneath the surface. He bowed once. By your command. Dawn. Only hours away. The word felt like a death knell. Kale turned to me, eyes hard as tempered steel. You wanted to witness justice, you'll see, the cost of treason before the sun rises. He strode forward and I followed, my heart hammering so hard it drowned out the sound of our footsteps. The blood guard marched behind us, armor glinting in the flickering light, a grim procession of judgment. We descended the spiral stairs, the air thickening with damp and despair. The smell of rust and mildew clung to the walls. Faint sounds echoed through the darkness. Moans, whispers, the quiet laughter of the broken. The dungeons of the Varean fortress were carved straight from the bones of the mountain. Kyle didn't slow until we reached the last cell, a rusted cage set deep into the rock. And there he was, Riven Thorn, chained to the wall, wrists raw beneath iron manacles, his fine clothes torn and smeared with blood and dust. His face bruised, unrecognizable, but his eyes were fire. When he lifted them, they blazed, not with pain, but hatred. Kinslayer, he spat, his voice hoarse, burning. Come to gloat before you kill me in the dark. Kyle's face didn't move. His tone was steel. The sentence will be carried out at dawn. In the courtyard, as the law demands. He wasn't a brother in that moment, only a king wearing his crown like a blade. Riven's glare flicked past him to me. The moment our eyes met, his fury faltered. The man who had once held my hand beneath the moonlight now looked at me as if the sight of me finished what his chains had begun. Riven's fury faltered for only a heartbeat replaced by something far worse. Betrayal. Lyra! He breathed, his voice raw and splintered. You're with him. You wear his mark. After everything, after what we were, you chose the monster. I didn't choose. My voice broke, swallowed by the dungeon's echo. She chose nothing. Kael Varen growled, stepping forward like a thunderclap. This is between you and me, brother. Leave her out of it. Riven's laugh was a cracked, wild sound that scraped against the stone. Leave her out of it. She's the only thing in it. His eyes burned fever bright. I did this for her. I would have burned this cursed kingdom. To ash for her, and you. He strained against his chains, fury shaking every muscle. You let her stand here wearing your colors like she's a prize you stole. Then his voice dropped to something crueler, quieter. Tell me, Kael, did you force her? Does she cry for me when you take her to your bed? The words hit like knives. I flinched, shame and fury colliding in my chest. Kael went still, deathly still, before a growl tore from deep within him, low and primal, shaking the iron bars. The psychic bond between them detonated. Their rage collided like two storms feeding on each other, and I was trapped in the middle of it. Pain ripped through my skull, white-hot and blinding. I cried out, clutching my head as their fury echoed through me like thunder. Kael reacted instantly. He stumbled back from the cell, eyes flashing silver. Enough, he snarled, not at Riven, but at the link that bound them. He seized my arm, pulling me toward the stairway. Run back to him! Lyra. Riven's voice followed, breaking into a scream that clawed the air. Hide behind your new master, but remember this, when they cut off my head, the blood will stain your hands too. We fled upward, his curses chasing us through the narrow stairs until the dungeon's poison finally gave way to the cold air above. I could still feel it clinging to my skin. Kael dragged me back to his chambers, the shattered door still hanging loose from its hinges, a relic of all that had already been destroyed. He let go of me in the center of the room, his chest heaving, his control unraveling thread by thread. You saw it, he rasped, eyes wild. You saw what he's become. There's no reason left in him, only madness. He's not mad, I shouted through tears. He's broken. You took everything from him. His future, his bride, and now you want his life. What did you expect? Gratitude. I expected him to understand duty. Kael roared, his voice shaking the chamber. That the crown demands more than what our hearts want. I've given everything for that throne, my peace, my youth, my soul, and he'd destroy it all for a woman he's known for a handful of days. The truth of it hung heavy, brutal. I sank to my knees, empty despair hollowing me out. Dawn was near. One brother would die. The other would live, haunted by the bond that forced him to feel every heartbeat of that death. There were no victors here, only ruins wearing crowns. Please, I whispered, tears streaking my face. Don't do this. Exile him. Strip his title anything but death. Don't become a kinslayer because of me. Kael stared down at me, pain twisting through every line of his face. My plea gutted him. I saw the instant his will faltered, not the king's, but the man's. With a broken cry, he swept a silver decanter from the table. It shattered against the stone wall, splattering red wine that ran like blood down the cracks. "Damn you," he whispered hoarsely, voice breaking. "Damn you, for making me feel." He turned away, facing the window where dawn's first pale light brushed the horizon. For a long, hollow silence, he didn't move. Then softly, as though speaking to himself, he said, "There is one other way." He didn't look back. His tone was low, haunted. An ancient law. A different kind of trial. It might spare his life. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes hollowed the air between us. "It will likely cost me my own," Kael'Varin said. The words struck like a heartbeat of impossible hope inside despair's tomb. I rose slowly, my grief forgotten in the face of the quiet, devastating resignation in his expression. "What is it? What law?" He didn't answer right away. He stood at the broken door, staring into the dim corridor where dawn was beginning to slice through the darkness. The castle was stirring, baking bread, burning wood life, continuing while a brother's death loomed. "There is an old magic," he said, finally. His voice low, roughened by exhaustion. "Older than the crowns of men, older than my bloodline. It's a trial not of guilt, but of dominance of right." When he turned toward me, I barely recognized him. The weariness had carved years into his face overnight. "An alpha's rule is absolute," he continued, "but when his authority is challenged by his own blood, he may invoke the trial of the moon. He must prove his soul stronger than the chaos that lives in every wolf's heart." A chill coiled through me, sharp and primal. How I whispered. He must face the unchained, a spirit of raw wolf instinct. Rage, hunger, savagery without reason, without mercy. Kael's gaze drifted to the pale horizon beyond the window. He must meet it in trance mind against beast and bind it with nothing but his will. If he succeeds, the old magic restores his right to rule. His word becomes law unchallenged, unbreakable. Even mercy would be his to grant. The knot of dread in my chest twisted tighter. And if he fails, he looked at me then, and I saw it, the abyss he was willing to step into. If he fails, it devours him. His soul shatters. At best, he's left a mindless beast to be put down like an animal. At worst, he dies. My breath caught. "Kael," he continued, voice raw. "Either way, the Alpha dies, and the realm falls into chaos. Civil war. Blood. But I would rather risk my life than become the brother who kills his own blood for the sake of a throne." The enormity of it slammed into me. He was trading a certainty. Riventhorn's death for a gamble that could cost him his life, his sanity, his very soul. All because I had begged him not to become a kinslayer. "You can't," I said, shaking my head. "It's too much. The kingdom needs you. The kingdom needs an alpha it can trust," he countered, voice rough with conviction. "Not a tyrant who kills his brother for a woman he claimed by force." He met my gaze, his eyes burning with painful truth. "The bond ties me to your grief, Lyra. I feel it with every breath. I can't rule with your sorrow clawing through me. This is the only way to cleanse it for both of us." Before I could answer, he turned and strode into the hall. His voice thundered through the castle, "Summon Aaron Solon. Clear the lower courtyard. Bring the prince from the cells and my ceremonial armor." The stillness of dawn shattered into chaos. Servants ran, soldiers shouted. The whisper spread like fire. Not an execution. A rite. The rite of dominance. Something no one had dared invoke in over 5 centuries. A myth older than memory, now reborn in blood and moonlight. I was swept along with the current, powerless to stop it. They brought me a plain gray gown to replace Kael's tunic. But his scent clung to my skin, a haunting reminder of what he was risking. They led us not to the courtyard, but downward into the mountain's heart, to the sacred cavern of the moon spring. The air shimmered with cold luminescence. Aaron Solon was already there, his ancient face grave, flanked by 2 acolytes, arranging relics, bowls of salt, bundles of wolfsbane, and a curved blade forged from meteor silver. Then they brought Riven. He walked between four blood guard, his wrists free but bruised. His defiance faltered when he saw the circle of symbols etched around the pool. Confusion clouded his fury. "What game is this?" he demanded, eyes locking on his brother. Kael stood at the water's edge, bare-chested, a leather harness crossing his shoulders. The crude bandage I had tied still marked his ribs. No crown, no armor, only a man stripped to his essence. "This is no mockery, brother," Kael said, his voice echoing through the cavern like thunder through stone. "You challenge my right to rule. I won't prove it with your death, but with my soul." Aaron Solon stepped forward, his voice dry and ceremonial. "Your Majesty Kael Varen, by the ancient laws, do you willingly submit yourself to the right of dominance? To reaffirm your claim as Alpha of this realm?" "I do." Kael said, his voice steady as the earth beneath him. The elder turned toward Riven. "And you, Prince Riven Thorn, do you accept the challenge your words have called forth? Do you accept this trial as final judgment upon your life and your claim?" The cavern fell silent except for the faint echo of Aaron Solon's voice. Riven Thorn stared at his brother, at the sacred markings surrounding the moon spring, at the cold certainty in Kael Varen's eyes. The full horror of what was unfolding hit him like a blow. This wasn't politics. This wasn't theater. This was a death sentence wrapped in faith. The fury that had once driven him drained away, leaving behind only the boy he had been, the brother who had once looked up to Kael. His throat bobbed as he tried to speak. His voice cracked, trembling. "I accept." The rite began. A low chant rose from the acolytes, guttural and ancient, vibrating through the stone floor and up my spine. Aaron Solon traced a ring of silver dust and salt around the pool, sealing the air with an energy so thick it felt alive. I was placed just outside the circle beside Riven, his face pale, his body shaking. Kael looked at me one last time from across the glowing cavern. There was no fear left in him, only a terrible, lonely resolve. Then he turned and stepped into the moonspring. The silver water lapped against his waist, still and mirror smooth. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, surrendering himself to something far beyond flesh and will. The chants deepened the air, pulsing with a rhythm that didn't belong to this world. Through the bond I felt it, a door opening inside Kael's soul. A door that led somewhere cold, wild, and ancient. The Unchained had awakened. It wasn't evil. It was older than evil, a force born of the first wolf's hunger. It reeked of frozen forest of blood on snow, of endless gnawing solitude. It was the beast beneath all beasts. Kael's body went rigid, his jaw locking. A feral growl rolled from deep in his chest, too savage to be human. His muscles convulsed, veins standing out like cords of iron. He was fighting it, his will against pure chaos. Through the bond I saw fragments of his struggle, a forest drenched in crimson moonlight, shadows with yellow eyes, claws raking across my mind. The spirit was trying to rip him apart, to shred everything human, until only the wolf remained. Kael's scream tore through the chamber, raw and terrible. Water splashed in waves as he thrashed, the moonlight shimmering across his body like liquid fire. The chanting faltered. "He's losing," Riven whispered beside me, voice breaking. His hands were trembling. "Moon, have mercy." What have I done? He was right. I could feel Kael slipping. His presence through the bond flickered like a dying flame, his consciousness dissolving under the Unchained's power. He was being unmade, and I knew then, if I did nothing, he would die. He had once called my essence peace. If his torment flowed through me, then my calm could flow back to him. "No," I whispered. Ignoring the elder's sharp cry, I broke through the silver circle and plunged into the pool. The cold bit into my skin like knives, the hem of my dress dragging heavy around my legs. Kael was thrashing, half submerged, his body trembling with inhuman strength. "Kael," I screamed, wading through the freezing water. "Kael!" Listen to me." His eyes snapped open, no longer gray but burning gold. The wolf looked out through them, its snarl echoing off the cavern walls. I didn't flinch. I reached for him, pressing my trembling hand against his chest. "Come back," I begged. "Come back to me." Through the bond I poured everything I had, my memories of him, of the quiet between us, of the warmth that defied the cold. I sent him every ounce of peace I could find inside myself. "I'm here," I whispered. "You're not alone." My palm touched the scar along his cheek. The beast recoiled as if burned. The golden light in his eyes faltered, flickering. His body shuddered, and for one breath I saw him. "Lyra!" He gasped. The Unchained roared in defiance, but it was too late. Kyle found his foothold. With a sound that was both fury and freedom, he threw back his head and roared a sound that shook the mountain to its bones. The roar of a true alpha. The savage energy recoiled, collapsing in on itself. The cavern's glow dimmed. The moonspring stilled its surface smooth once more. Silence. Kyle swayed where he stood, his chest heaving. The golden fire faded from his eyes, leaving only storm-gray exhaustion. He was trembling, spent, but alive. The king was still standing. The beast had bowed. He was himself again. He had won. Kyle collapsed forward, and I barely managed to catch him, his full weight pressing me down into the frigid water. He was solid, real, alive. His arms wrapped around me with a desperate, trembling strength, his face buried in the crook of my neck. I could feel his heart hammering wildly against mine, proof that the impossible had been done. Across the pool, Aaron Solon slowly lowered his hands, his ancient face awash with awe. "It is done," he breathed. "The rite is complete. His authority is absolute." Over Kale's shoulder I saw Riven Thorn. He had fallen to his knees, his face hidden in his palms, his shoulders shaking with soundless sobs. The hatred that had consumed him was gone, burned away by the terrible beauty of his brother's sacrifice. Kyle stirred, pushing himself upright, one arm still firm around my waist, as if grounding himself in my presence. He turned toward his brother, his voice low and steady, stripped of fury, but thrumming with power, older than any crown. "Prince Riventhorn," he said, and the air trembled with the authority of the old magic. "For the crime of treason against the crown, I do not sentence you to death." Riven lifted his tear-streaked face, disbelief flickering through his expression. "I sentence you to life," Kyle continued. "You are stripped of your title and claim. You will be exiled to the Southern Isles to serve in the Healers Guild. You will learn what it means to mend what you have broken. You leave with the morning tide. That is my judgment. That is the law." It was mercy, raw, staggering mercy. Kale's gaze finally returned to me. I was still pressed against his side, water dripping from our skin into the shimmering pool. He looked down at me, his eyes no longer haunted but clear, deep, and burning with something fierce and possessive that made my breath catch. He had marked me before, claimed me with power and need. But this was different. This was a king, reborn in fire and sacrifice, looking at the woman who had anchored his soul back to the light. He reached up his calloused fingers, tracing the line of my jaw, his touch sending a shiver through me. "Lyra," he murmured my name, spoken like a vow, a brand, a promise of dawn. The first snows of winter fell like whispered blessings, covering the castle in silence. From the arched window of the Royal Solar, I watched the flakes drift past the glass, fragile, fleeting stars. A year ago I had watched those same flakes from behind iron bars. Now it was from a home. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the air with the scent of pine and oak. The sound no longer stirred fear in me, but comfort, his comfort. My fingers traced the frost along the windowpane, steady and sure. The trembling girl who once stood before the bonding stone was gone. In her place stood a woman who had walked through fire, who had healed wounds deeper than flesh. A queen. The door opened softly. I had felt his presence before, hearing him, the warmth threading through the bond we now shared. It was no longer a chain of pain, but a silver hum of peace between two souls. Kyle Varin stepped into the room, not as the ruler who commanded armies, but as a man at ease in his own power. He still wore his black leathers from his meeting with the Crimson Circle, yet the weight of his crown seemed lighter now. He paused, his gray eyes finding me by the window. The king slipped away, and my husband stood in his place. "The snow's early this year," he said, voice low and rough, carrying that familiar warmth that lived in my bones. "The northern mountains send their regards," I replied, smiling faintly as I turned toward him. "The grain shipments arrived safely. The storehouses are full. Our people will be warm this winter." He watched me with that same quiet wonder he always did, as though he still couldn't quite believe I was real. The look made my heart ache with a fierce tenderness. Kel reached out his scarred hand, cupping my cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of my skin. "My wise queen," he murmured, always thinking of the pack. My influence in the kingdom had always been quiet, subtle as the turning tide, shaping things not by command, but by steady persistence. I rebuilt the infirmaries, revived the forgotten knowledge of the healers' guilds, taught that true strength lies not in the sword, but in the hands that mend and the hearts that endure. Kyle Varan, in return, had tempered my compassion with his hard-earned wisdom. He taught me that mercy without strength was fragility, and strength without mercy was tyranny. Together we were balanced winter and spring, iron and earth fury, and grace. "There's a letter," I said, softly covering his hand with mine. It came with the last shipment from the southern isles. His expression shifted, guarded, uncertain, the shadow of his brother's name still tender in his soul. I led him to the firelit table where a single parchment rested. Kyle picked it up and began to read, his eyes scanning the familiar, elegant script. It was the third letter Riven Thorn had sent since his exile. The first had been stiff, defiant. The second hesitant, reaching toward understanding. But this one was different. I watched his face as he read. The hard lines softened, his jaw unclenched. When he was done, he exhaled slowly and handed the letter to me. "Brother, the storms here are relentless, but the people are stronger still. I have learned more about healing in 1 month than I ever learned about ruling in 10 years. It humbles me. It heals me. The guildmaster is an iron-willed old woman, says I have the hands of a prince and not as praise. But she teaches me anyway. I delivered my first child last week, a healthy boy. His parents, humble fisherfolk, wept with gratitude. They didn't care who I was. They cared only that I helped. For the first time, I feel a purpose that is my own, not one I inherited. One I've earned. I've heard word of home that the harvests are full, the people content, that the Alpha King rules with strength and fairness, and his queen brings healing wherever she walks. I'm glad. You are what the kingdom needed. I see that now. I was blind and proud and loved what was never meant to be mine. Tell Lyra. I hope she's found peace. I believe I'm starting to find mine." Riven tears blurred the ink before I could finish reading. The wound that had once split 2 brothers and nearly broken a realm had begun to heal. Kyle took the letter gently from my trembling hands and placed it into the fire. We watched together as the parchment curled and blackened, the words dissolving into ash, the ghosts of the past drifting away with the smoke. "He's where he belongs," Kale murmured, his voice thick, unsteady. "And so are we," I whispered back. He pulled me into his arms, holding me close, my head resting against the steady rhythm of his heart. The scar across his face caught the glow of the firelight, a mark of the man who had fought his own darkness and won. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly, his voice stripped of the king's authority, laid bare in vulnerability. "The life you might have had with him, the garden, the peace." I thought of Riven's gentle eyes, of the promise of a quiet life that had never truly belonged to me. That world had been an illusion, soft and safe, but not mine. My reality was this Kyle, fierce and scarred, bound to me by blood magic and a love that had survived fire and ruin. A life of storms and redemption. My place was never in a garden, I said firmly, tracing the silver line of his scar. It's here, mending the man who carries the wounds of a kingdom. A shudder went through him, a release so deep it seemed to unmake the last shadows within him. He bent down, and when his lips met mine, it wasn't the hunger of a beast, but the reverence of a man who had finally found home. The kiss spoke of everything: gratitude, devotion, a love forged in chaos and tempered into eternity. He lifted me in his arms, carrying me to the bed that had once been a place of fear, but was now our sanctuary. The fire burned low, casting gold across his skin, while snow drifted outside in quiet grace. Kyle looked down at me, the alpha, the king, the man. Every part of him finally whole. And in the storm gray of his eyes, I saw my own reflection. I was not a captive. I was not a prize. I was the keeper of his heart, the anchor of his soul. Mine, he whispered against my lips, not as a claim, but as a vow, a promise, forever.